When it rains today, you close a window, maybe make coffee, put on something to watch. Rain is background noise. It makes you feel calm, maybe a little sleepy. Now imagine that same rain. 50,000 years ago. No walls, no roof, no dry clothes. The exact same sound you fall asleep to could kill you in 3 different ways before it stopped. The first danger was cold. A wet human loses body heat up to 25 times faster than a dry one. Without waterproof shelter, a long rainstorm could push core temperature into dangerous range within hours. The second danger was flooding. Caves and rock shelters sit at the base of hillsides and near rivers. Archaeologists have found flood sediment layers inside occupied caves. Water came in while people were living there. Some of those caves were never occupied again afterward. The flood ended everything. The third danger was predators. Rain drove animals to seek shelter too, sometimes the same shelter you were in. There are cave sites in South Africa where human and large cat remains are found in the same layers. Rain compressed the entire world. Humans, predators, and prey all squeezed into the same small dry spaces at once. In the middle of all that, one task mattered more than everything else: keeping the fire going. Before roughly 40,000 years ago, we are not certain how reliably humans could start fire from scratch. Controlling a fire that already exists and creating one from nothing are 2 very different skills. If your fire went out in a rainstorm, you might not be able to relight it. That was a genuine life or death situation. Some groups solved this by carrying fire with them. Smoldering coals wrapped in green leaves or packed into tinder fungus. Tinder fungus could catch a spark and smolder inside itself for hours, a biological fire carrier. When they found Otzi the Iceman, the 5,000-year-old frozen man in the Alps, he carried a complete fire kit. Tinder fungus, flint, iron pyrite for striking sparks. Even 5,000 years ago, losing your fire was serious enough to prepare for. When rain hit, the first priority was not shelter, it was the fire. Move it, shield it, feed it carefully. Find dead lower branches from coniferous trees, protected by the canopy above, still dry underneath even in rain. Split open wet logs to reach the dry wood inside. The outside is soaked, but the core stays dry. Use birch bark as kindling. Birch contains a natural chemical called betulin that burns even when wet. One person's entire job during a rainstorm might be simply sitting beside that fire for hours, feeding it, shielding it, never letting it drop too low, never smothering it with too much. Because that fire was everything: warmth, light, safety from predators, cooked food, the center of all social life. Letting it go out was not just careless, it was potentially fatal for everyone in the group. So the fire was protected, and then came the next question: you are dry and warm, but you cannot leave. What do you do? The archaeological record gives a very clear answer: you make things. Caves and rock shelters are filled with evidence of manufacturing: stone tools in every stage of production, piles of flaking debris, tiny stone chips, concentrated in specific spots inside caves, exactly where someone sat near the fire to work. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found a 100,000-year-old ochre processing workshop, abalone shells used as mixing bowls, ochre ground into powder, bone tools used to stir and apply it. This was not basic survival. This was organized production. Someone sat in that cave and manufactured pigment with a system. And then there are the bone needles, appearing in the record around 61,000 years ago. Delicate, precise tools with tiny drilled eyes. You do not make a bone needle while running from anything. You make it when you are sitting still, focused, with hours available and nowhere to go. Rainy days gave people that concentrated, uninterrupted time, and they used every hour of it. String and rope also appear in the record during this period, and their story is remarkable. At a Neanderthal site in France, archaeologists found a tiny fragment of twisted plant fiber string dating to roughly 52,000 years ago. That is the oldest direct evidence of string ever found, made by Neanderthals, not modern humans. And at Hohlfels Cave in Germany, a 35,000-year-old tool was found carved from mammoth ivory. It had 4 holes and spiral grooves designed specifically for twisting plant fibers into rope. Someone sat in that cave and carved a dedicated rope-making machine, a purpose-built manufacturing tool. Making rope is slow, repetitive, and requires patience. The perfect task for being stuck inside during rain. And rope changed everything it touched. Tie things together, build better shelters, create snares and traps, bind tool heads to handles, carry loads, secure animal skins as clothing. An enormous amount of ancient technology ran on string, and string was almost certainly invented by someone stuck inside during a rainstorm with hours to fill. People were also improving their sleeping spaces during this time. At Sibudu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found bedding, actual bedding, layers of sedges, rushes, and grasses carefully arranged as sleeping mats. 77,000 years old. The top layers included leaves from a plant that functions as a natural insect repellent. Someone was not just surviving in that cave. They were making it comfortable. They were making it home. The bedding was periodically burned and replaced to keep it clean. 77,000 years ago, people were doing pest control. Now the story takes a turn nobody expects, because all of that, tools, rope, bedding, is the practical side. What came next was something entirely different. The art. Chauvet Cave in southern France contains paintings roughly 36,000 years old. Lions, horses, rhinos, bears, drawn with a level of skill and observation that still shocks people today. The artists understood anatomy, movement, and perspective. Animals drawn mid-stride with muscles tensed. These are not doodles. These are the work of people who watched animals for thousands of hours and recreated them from memory. Chauvet is not alone. Lascaux, Altamira, Sulawesi in Indonesia, where cave art dates to at least 45,000 years ago. Sulawesi contains the oldest known figurative art in the world, 45,000 years ago, painted by hand. But here is what makes this truly remarkable. These paintings are not at the cave entrance where you shelter. They're deep inside, sometimes hundreds of meters in, through narrow passages you have to crawl through. Someone carried animal fat lamps into total darkness and painted. Nobody does that when the weather is perfect and the hunting is good. You do that when you cannot go outside, when the rain has been falling for 2 days and every tool has been sharpened and there is nothing left to do but go deeper and create. The most creative explosion in human prehistory happened in the exact places where people were most likely to be stuck inside. And that leads to something even larger. Rain did not just create art, it may have created culture itself. Think about what happens when 15 to 30 people are forced into a confined space together for days with nothing to do. You talk, you listen, you share. Information moves from person to person in ways that simply cannot happen while everyone is scattered across the landscape hunting. A study of modern hunter-gatherer groups found something remarkable about fireside conversations. During daytime, people talked about practical things, resources, land, disputes. But at night, around the fire, over 80% of conversation shifted. Stories, songs, ceremonies. The firelight itself changed what people talked about. It softened the social atmosphere. The campfire was not just warmth. It was the original social network, and the things being shared around that fire were not small talk. They were survival, where water sources dry up in summer, which plants cause illness, where the best flint deposits are, how to track a specific animal. That is not gossip. That is critical knowledge being passed from one brain to another through speech. And beyond the practical knowledge, there were stories, myths, explanations for why the rain comes and where it goes. Every ancient culture on Earth has rain mythology. Someone invented those stories while sitting in exactly the situation the story explained. The oldest verified oral traditions match real geological events that happened 7,000 years ago. Australian Aboriginal stories describing sea level changes from 7,000 years ago survived intact through pure oral transmission. 7,000 years, nothing written, just people telling each other over and over. Generation after generation, that kind of cultural memory does not develop without enormous amounts of time spent doing exactly this. Sitting together and retelling. Rainy days were not dead time, they were transmission time, the days when knowledge moved from the old to the young, when skills were taught by demonstration beside a fire, when the group's collective memory was reinforced, updated, and passed forward. Now here's the part nobody expects. Rain was not always bad. Sometimes it was the best thing that could happen. After heavy rain, the ground is soft, and soft ground means perfect tracking conditions, deep, clear, detailed prints. You can see exactly which animals passed, how recently, how fast, in which direction. Some of the best hunting conditions in the world come immediately after the rain stops. Rain also brought fresh water. Rock depressions near prehistoric campsites filled with clean rainwater. Some of those depressions show signs of being deliberately carved deeper to hold more water. Ancient water storage. Rain also triggered food explosions. Mushrooms and certain plants appear immediately after rain. Tubers are easier to dig from wet soil. Insects come to the surface. The food supply did not stop. It transformed. Termites swarm after rain in tropical Africa. Dense, protein-rich, no tools or weapons needed to collect. The groups that understood these post-rain opportunities had an enormous advantage over those that did not. Rain changed the available resources completely. Knowing those changes was as important as knowing the dry season landscape. So, the ancient relationship with rain was complicated. Fear and opportunity existing at the same time. So let us put together the full picture. What did ancient humans actually do when it rained all day? They kept the fire alive. That was the first and most important task, and it was never finished. They made tools. Stone tools, bone tools, ivory tools. Every stage of production happened by firelight inside caves. They made clothing. The bone needles tell us someone was sewing during these indoor hours. They made rope, slowly, patiently. The twisted fiber and the rope-making tools appear in the same cave sites. They ground pigment, mixed it in shell bowls, prepared it for use on cave walls and on skin. They improved their sleeping spaces, replaced old bedding, added insect-repellent plants to the fresh layers. They talked. around the fire for hours, sharing knowledge, stories, and the accumulated wisdom of the group. They taught. Skills were demonstrated and practiced. The younger generation absorbed what the elders knew, and some of them went deeper into the cave and painted animals on the walls by lamplight, not as decoration, not as casual doodling, as something that required deep knowledge and careful attention. And when the rain finally stopped, they emerged into soft ground covered in fresh animal tracks. Ready, rested, equipped with newly made tools and clothing and rope. Better prepared than before the rain started. Rain did not slow them down. It gave them time to prepare for everything that came next. Now let us look at the bigger picture. What does all of this actually tell us about ancient human life? First, ancient humans were never truly idle. Enforced rest was immediately converted into productive work. The concept of wasted time simply did not exist. Every available hour had a use. Second, necessity and creativity are deeply connected. Constraint produces innovation. The bone needle, the rope-making tool, the cave paintings. All products of people with time and nowhere to go. Third, the campfire was the original meeting room, the place where information became culture. Let us look specifically at what the rainy season produced in terms of human development. The most sophisticated stone tools appear to have been made during periods of forced inactivity, not during active hunting seasons. Archaeologists can distinguish quickly made field-expedient tools from carefully crafted tools made with time and attention. The carefully crafted ones cluster in cave and shelter sites. Made indoors, made with time, made during rain. The same pattern appears with clothing. Bone needles and evidence of sewing cluster in shelter sites. Clothing kept people alive in cold weather, and the time to make it properly came from enforced indoor periods. Rope and cordage also cluster in shelter contexts. The slow, patient work of fiber twisting required uninterrupted time. And the art. All of it is in sheltered locations, caves, rock shelters, enclosed spaces. Not a single major piece of ancient art has been found in an open, exposed outdoor location. All of it made inside. All of it made with time. All of it made when the weather outside made going out impossible. The rainy season was not a gap in human development. It was a driver of it. Every tool that was made during a rainy day eventually enabled something on a clear day. Every story told around a fire during a storm eventually carried knowledge to someone who needed it. Every piece of clothing sewn during a wet season kept someone alive through the cold season that followed. The productive indoor time and the active outdoor time were two halves of the same survival system, and both halves were necessary. Modern people often think of ancient life as constant outdoor action, hunting, moving, surviving. But a significant portion of ancient life was spent exactly where you are right now, inside, near warmth, making things. The setting was different. The fire was more important. The stakes were higher. But the pattern was familiar. Stay inside, stay warm, use the time well. Get ready for when you can go out again. Now let us look at what this tells us about human nature more broadly. The first observation. Humans are extraordinarily good at filling available time with productive activity. Not because someone told them to, because idle time in a dangerous world felt worse than working. The impulse to make things, to improve things, to create things, that is not a modern trait. It is ancient. The second observation. The campfire created something that no other ancient technology could create, a shared mental space. The fire drew everyone toward the same point. The warmth, the light, the safety all concentrated in one place. And around that point, language, stories, and shared knowledge became possible in ways they were not during scattered daytime activity. Modern research on group cognition suggests that shared attention, everyone looking at the same thing together, enhances learning and memory. Ancient humans around a fire were doing exactly that. Shared attention, shared experience, shared memory formation. The third observation, constraint and creativity are more connected than most people realize. The bone needle was not invented by someone with unlimited time and resources. It was invented by someone stuck inside who needed a better way to join skins. The rope-making tool was not invented by a craftsman with a fully equipped workshop. It was carved by someone with ivory, time, and a specific problem to solve. The cave paintings were not made by professional artists with patrons and studios. They were made by people with fire, pigment, and nowhere else to go. Limitation produced innovation. Enforced stillness produced creativity. The rain was the constraint that made the leap possible. The fourth observation. Ancient humans were not just surviving, they were building. Every rainy day was an investment in the future. Made tools last longer. Better clothing survived longer seasons. Better rope held better shelters. Better transmitted knowledge meant fewer fatal mistakes by the next generation. They were not living day to day in the way we sometimes imagine. They were building forward, and the rain gave them the time to do it. Not despite being stuck inside, but because of being stuck inside. Constraint as catalyst. That is the real story of what ancient humans did when it rained. So what does all of this actually tell us? The first lesson. Downtime is not wasted time. It is preparation time. Ancient humans understood this instinctively. Every hour inside was an hour invested in the next time outside. The second lesson. Fire is older than we think as a social technology, not just heat, not just light, a gathering mechanism. The fire created the conditions for culture, for storytelling, for knowledge transfer, for the kind of deep social bonding that made large groups possible. Without the campfire, the transmission of cultural knowledge across generations would have been far slower and less reliable. The third lesson. Art is not a luxury that appeared after survival was secured. It appeared alongside survival. The same people who were fighting to keep their fire alive during a rainstorm were also painting animals underground. Art was not a sign that they had extra time and nothing to worry about. It was what they did with necessity and constraint. The fourth lesson. The things we call primitive cultures were doing something remarkable. They were managing knowledge. Stories that survived 7,000 years, oral traditions that preserved accurate geological events, knowledge systems that crossed generations without writing. That is not primitive. That is a knowledge management system of extraordinary durability and accuracy. The fifth lesson. The divide between practical work and creative work is much newer than we think. For ancient humans, making a tool and making art happened in the same space, at the same time, by the same people. The bone needle maker and the cave painter sat beside the same fire. They may have been the same person. The separation of practical and creative is a modern invention. In ancient life, they were the same impulse. The impulse to make something better than it needs to be, to add a carved spiral to a useful tool, to paint with more skill than the task requires. That impulse runs through everything from the oldest bone needle to the Chauvet cave paintings to everything humans have made since. And it was in a cave, during rain, by firelight, that this impulse first found its fullest expression. Not in abundance, not in ease, in constraint, in darkness, in the middle of a storm. Here's what all of this actually means. The next time it rains and you feel slightly trapped, consider what your ancestors did with that same feeling. They kept the fire alive. That came first, always. Then they made tools, sewed clothing, twisted rope, ground pigment, improved their sleeping space. They talked around the fire. They taught each other. They told stories that would carry knowledge across 100 generations. And some of them went deep into the dark and painted animals that 36,000 years later would still take your breath away. Not despite the rain, because of the rain. The rain was not the enemy of ancient human progress. It was one of its engines. Every invention made by firelight during a storm eventually helped someone survive a clear day. Every story told in the rain eventually carried knowledge to someone who needed it to stay alive. The rain gave ancient humans something that clear skies and full hunting days never could. Time. Uninterrupted, enforced, unavoidable time. Time to think, to make, to teach, to create. And they used every hour of it. The bone needle, the rope, the cave paintings, the stories, the oral traditions. All of it came from downtime. From the hours when they could not go out and had nothing to do except sit near a fire and think. And that, sitting near a fire during a storm and thinking, might be the most ancient human experience there is. The setting was different. The fire was more important. The stakes were much higher, but the feeling was the same. Stuck inside, warm, thinking, and making something out of the time. Your ancestors did it for 300,000 years before you, and everything they made during those rainy days eventually led to you. Subscribe to Ancivex, a new ancient history video every 2 days.